When your dog brings home a bobcat and refuses to let go, everyone thought it was a mistake that would end in tragedy. Prepare to be amazed by the most extraordinary true story you'll ever hear. A tale so incredible that wildlife experts called it impossible and against every law of nature. This is the jaw-dropping account of how one man's loyal companion made a decision that would shatter everything we thought we knew about predator and prey relationships. The warrior's last mission. Unbelievable but true. In the remote wilderness of Elk Ridge, Montana, where towering peaks pierce the sky like ancient guardians of forgotten secrets, lived Samuel "Sam" Winters, a man whose weathered hands told stories of both triumph and heartbreak. At 65, Sam's steel-gray hair reflected the wisdom of someone who had witnessed miracles and tragedies in equal measure. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. Shocking revelation. Sam wasn't just any ordinary rancher. For 22 grueling years, he had served as a military dog trainer, specializing in the most elite German shepherds whose courage under fire had saved countless lives. These weren't just pets. They were warriors with hearts of gold, trained to detect explosives, track enemies, and protect their human partners with unwavering loyalty that defied comprehension. When retirement finally called, Sam returned to his ancestral sheep ranch, bringing with him Duke, his final and most remarkable canine partner. Here's where it gets incredible. Duke wasn't just any military dog. He was a legend among handlers, a German shepherd whose intelligence and intuition had earned him decorations for service that most humans never achieve. Mind-blowing fact, 8 years into civilian life, Duke remained magnificent. His black and tan coat had acquired distinguished silver threads around his noble muzzle, but his muscular frame still carried the bearing of a seasoned warrior. Every night, Sam would listen to the rhythmic sound of Duke's patrol, never missing a single round, as he circled their modest flock of prize-winning merino sheep. Heartbreaking truth. After Sam's beloved wife Laura passed away 3 years earlier, Duke had become more than a companion. He had become Sam's lifeline to hope, his reason to wake up each morning, his silent confidant during those long, lonely nights when grief threatened to consume everything. The vast ranch stretched across hundreds of acres, where golden grasslands met dense pine forests, and crystal-clear streams carved their way through valleys that seemed untouched by time. This was more than a home. It was a sanctuary where man and animal lived in perfect harmony, where every sunrise brought new possibilities, and where the bond between Sam and Duke had grown stronger with each passing season. The storm that changed everything. Warning, what happens next will leave you speechless. The autumn of 2019 arrived with unusual ferocity. Meteorologists were stunned as unprecedented cold fronts swept down from the Canadian Rockies, bringing with them the promise of what would become known as the winter that broke all records. Weather stations across Montana recorded temperatures dropping faster than anyone had seen in decades, and the early snowfall began in September, months ahead of schedule. Sam, with decades of experience reading nature's warning signs, had prepared meticulously. His survival instincts were legendary among local ranchers who often sought his advice on weather patterns and animal behavior. He'd reinforced every fence post, stockpiled enough feed to last 6 months, and split enough firewood to heat his home through the harshest winter imaginable. But nothing could prepare him for October 15th. Shocking twist. On this particular morning, as snow began falling in thick, unusual flakes that seemed to muffle all sound, Sam followed his daily routine, letting Duke out for his morning patrol. The dog bounded through the door with his usual enthusiasm, his breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. But when minutes turned to an hour, and Duke still hadn't returned, Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Duke had never been late. not once in 8 years. His military training had ingrained a precision that bordered on the supernatural. Morning patrol, breakfast, afternoon rounds, evening check, sleep. The routine never varied, never failed, never disappointed. This is where the story takes an unbelievable turn. Bundling up in his heavy winter coat, Sam stepped into a world transformed. The early snow had created an ethereal landscape where familiar landmarks disappeared under pristine white blankets. But his focus was laser-sharp on the tracks leading away from the ranch. Duke's paw prints told a story that made Sam's heart race. They weren't the usual meandering path of a dog exploring his territory. These tracks were purposeful, urgent, heading straight toward the dense pine forest that bordered the western edge of the property. Heart-stopping moment. Following the trail deeper into the woods, Sam called Duke's name repeatedly, his voice echoing off the snow-laden branches. The silence between his calls was deafening, broken only by the soft whisper of falling snow and the distant crack of tree branches adjusting to their white burden. Just when panic began to set in, he heard it. A bark unlike any he'd ever heard from Duke. It wasn't a warning bark or a playful call. It was something entirely different, urgent, insistent, almost protective. The sound sent shivers down Sam's spine because in all their years together, through military operations and ranch emergencies, he'd never heard Duke make that particular sound. The discovery that defied all logic. Prepare for the most shocking revelation yet. Pushing through the undergrowth, branches catching at his coat and snow sliding down his collar, Sam discovered Duke standing beside a massive fallen pine tree. The ancient giant had been uprooted by recent storms, its massive trunk creating a natural shelter beneath its exposed root system. Duke's behavior was unlike anything Sam had witnessed in their years together. What Sam saw next would haunt him forever. Nestled in a small hollow beneath the tree's exposed root system lay a young female bobcat, her golden coat matted with blood and dirt, her breathing rapid and shallow. She was magnificent even in her suffering, probably 2 years old, with the characteristic tufted ears and spotted coat that marked her as one of the region's most skilled predators. The wound on her hind leg was severe, clearly the result of a wire trap or sharp debris, the kind of injury that would prove fatal without immediate intervention. The bobcat's eyes held an intelligence that was almost human. Bright yellow orbs that seemed to assess, calculate, and somehow communicate despite the language barrier between species. Blood had pooled in the snow beneath her, airy and creating a stark crimson contrast against the pristine white that told Sam this was a life-or-death situation. Here's the part that will blow your mind. Any normal dog, especially one trained to protect livestock from exactly this type of predator, would have driven the bobcat away, barked aggressively, or maintained a threatening stance. Military dogs were specifically trained to eliminate threats to their assigned protected assets. Duke should have been treating this bobcat as enemy number one, but Duke did the impossible. Instead of showing hostility, he slowly lowered himself to the ground, placing his head on his front paws in a submissive posture that Sam had never, ever seen him display toward any wild animal. His tail wasn't wagging, but it wasn't rigid with aggression either. It was relaxed, almost respectful. Incredible moment. The injured bobcat, despite her pain and natural fear of humans and domestic animals, seemed to recognize something in Duke's demeanor. Her initial snarling and defensive posturing gradually subsided, replaced by watchful caution. Her ears, which had been flattened against her head in aggression, slowly returned to their normal position. It was as if these two natural enemies had reached an unspoken understanding that transcended millions of years of evolutionary programming. The silence in that forest clearing was profound. No birds sang, no wind stirred the branches. Even the falling snow seemed to pause. It was as if nature itself was holding its breath, witnessing something that challenged every law of the natural world. The rescue that shocked wildlife experts. Brace yourself for what happened next. Sam knew he was facing a potentially life-or-death decision, not just for the Bobcat, but potentially for himself and Duke. Every instinct screamed danger. Injured wild animals were unpredictable, and bobcats possessed razor-sharp claws capable of opening arteries and teeth designed for crushing bone. A single swipe could blind him, a bite could sever tendons, and a cornered predator was capable of incredible violence. But Duke's unprecedented behavior gave him pause. This dog had never been wrong about anything. Not about enemy positions in combat zones, not about potential threats to the sheep, not about storms approaching or strangers with ill intent. If Duke sensed something different about this situation, then Sam had to trust that judgment, even if it meant risking everything. Heart-pounding action. With movements born from years of handling panicked livestock and injured animals, Sam slowly removed his heavy outer coat. The sub-zero temperature immediately bit through his sweater, but he ignored the cold, focusing entirely on the delicate rescue operation ahead. Duke seemed to understand the plan instinctively, maintaining his protective vigil while somehow communicating to the Bobcat that no harm would come to her. The first night was critical. Sam slept in the barn, checking on his patient every hour, monitoring her breathing, ensuring she stayed warm and hydrated. Duke never left his post, sleeping beside the pen, his ears alert for any change in her condition. It was a vigil that would last for days. Two unlikely guardians watching over a creature that should have been their enemy. The name that started it all. "We'll call her Sierra," Sam announced on the third day. The name coming to him as naturally as breathing. Sierra, strong yet graceful, like the mountain range visible from his bedroom window each dawn. It was a name that honored both her wild nature and the sanctuary she'd found, a name that would soon become famous around the world. Sierra responded to her name immediately, her ears perking up whenever Sam spoke it, her eyes focusing on him with what could only be described as recognition. Duke approved of the name too, his tail wagging whenever Sam used it, as if he understood that their patient was no longer just the Bobcat, but a member of their small family. The friendship that stunned scientists. What happened next will make you believe in miracles. As winter's grip heightened on Elkridge, trapping the ranch in isolation with snowdrifts that reached the barn roof, Sam found himself the reluctant guardian of an impossible situation. Keeping a wild bobcat was illegal under federal and state wildlife protection laws. But the roads were impassable, phone lines down, and Sierra needed continued care to survive. The isolation was complete. No visitors, no government officials, no wildlife authorities. Just Sam, Duke, and Sierra in their own private world where the normal rules didn't seem to apply. It was during this isolation that the most remarkable transformation began. Mind-blowing development. Duke's fascination with Sierra's welfare intensified daily. He began bringing her gifts, his favorite tennis ball, a well-chewed rope toy, even his prized rawhide bone that he'd guarded jealously for years. These weren't random actions. Duke carefully selected each item, carrying it to Sierra's pen with the solemnity of a ceremony. At first, Sierra ignored these offerings, huddling in the corner of her pen, still wary of the strange domestic animal who showed her such unprecedented kindness. But curiosity began to overcome fear. She would creep closer to examine each gift, her sensitive nose investigating these foreign objects that carried Duke's scent. Breakthrough moment. By the end of the first week, Sierra had begun approaching the pen's edge whenever Duke appeared. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. She would extend her paw through the wire mesh, gently touching Duke's nose in what could only be described as a gesture of friendship. Duke would respond by gently licking her paw, a behavior that made Sam's heart race with wonder. Scientists would later call this impossible. The interaction between these two species violated everything known about predator-prey relationships, territorial behaviors, and natural instincts. Duke, trained to protect livestock from exactly this type of threat, was instead forming an emotional bond with a creature that should have been his natural enemy. The communication between them developed its own language, soft chuffs from Sierra that seemed to express contentment, gentle whines from Duke that conveyed concern, and a complex system of body language that Sam began to recognize and interpret. They were talking to each other in ways that transcended species barriers. Incredible discovery. Sierra began showing signs of emotional attachment to Duke that went beyond mere tolerance. When Duke left the barn for his sheep patrols, Sierra would pace restlessly, her calls becoming more frequent and distressed. When he returned, her relief was obvious. She would rush to the front of her pen, her tail twitching with excitement, her whole body language expressing joy.